The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Amelie's, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant, as Graham Hale checked his Patek Philippe watch for the 7th time. 7:43 p.m. She was 43 minutes late. Around him, the restaurant hummed with the quiet elegance of old money, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over white tablecloths, the subtle clink of silverware against fine china, hushed conversations punctuated by occasional laughter. Graham sat alone at table 17, the best table in the house, positioned perfectly to overlook Central Park's rain-soaked canopy. The reservation had cost him a favor he'd been saving for years. The custom-tailored Tom Ford suit he wore had cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything was perfect. Except she wasn't there. Graham Hale wasn't accustomed to waiting. At 42, he'd built Hale Industries from a single tech startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Forbes had called him the man who never misses. Wall Street Journal dubbed him America's most ruthless CEO. He'd acquired 17 companies in 5 years, dismantled 8 more, and turned failing ventures into profit machines with surgical precision. His life operated on schedules, projections, and calculated risks. But this blind date arranged by his persistent sister Caroline was proving to be his most spectacular miscalculation yet. "Mr. Hale, can I refresh your water?" A young server approached, her smile professional but her eyes betraying curiosity. Graham had become a spectacle, he realized. The lone man at the best table, surrounded by empty chairs. "No." His voice was clipped, final. The server retreated quickly. Graham knew that tone. It was the same voice that made board members squirm, competitors fold, and journalists think twice before asking follow-up questions. It was the voice of a man who controlled everything in his radius. Everything, except this moment. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his sharp features. Steel gray eyes, a jaw that could cut glass, dark hair touched with distinguished silver at the temples. 3 missed calls from Caroline. He ignored them. Instead, he opened the dating profile she'd forced him to view last week. Sophia Martinez, 34, marketing executive, loves art galleries and molecular gastronomy, seeking someone who values ambition and sophistication. "She's perfect for you," Caroline had insisted, practically shoving her iPad in his face during their monthly obligatory lunch. "Successful, cultured, intelligent, and she agreed to meet you despite your reputation." His reputation. Graham almost smiled. In business, his reputation was fearsome. The man who could smell weakness in a balance sheet from 3 states away, who never gave second chances, who believed sentiment was the enemy of success. In his personal life, that reputation had left him eating dinner alone more times than he could count. 7:51 p.m. The maitre d', a distinguished man named Philippe, whom Graham had tipped generously to ensure perfect service, approached with careful steps. "Mr. Hale, I've tried calling the reservation number provided. No answer. Would you perhaps like to order while you wait? The chef has prepared something special. I'll wait." Graham's eyes remained fixed on the rain-streaked window. Across the dining room, he could feel the stares. Pitying, curious, perhaps even amused. Graham Hale, the man who'd graced the cover of Fortune magazine 3 times, stood up on a blind date. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed. Caroline again. He answered this time. "Don't say it," he warned. "Graham, I'm so sorry." His sister's voice was genuinely distressed. "I just spoke to Sophia. She said she couldn't go through with it. Something about reading that New York Times profile on you last week. The one that called you emotionally unavailable and more machine than man. I'm so sorry, I thought, it's fine." It wasn't fine. But Graham had learned long ago that admitting vulnerability was admitting defeat. "I have work to catch up on anyway." "Graham, wait." He ended the call. The rain intensified, sheets of water now obscuring the park view. Through the restaurant's ambient noise, Graham could hear fragments of surrounding conversations. A couple celebrating an anniversary, a business deal being sealed over wine, someone proposing 3 tables away. Life, abundant and messy and gloriously unplanned, swirling around him while he sat in his perfectly pressed suit at his perfectly reserved table, alone. 8:02 p.m. Graham made a decision. He'd finish his water, leave a generous tip to compensate for the wasted table, and return to his penthouse where he belonged, surrounded by market reports, quarterly projections, and the comfortable silence of solitude. This had been a mistake from the start. Caroline meant well, but she didn't understand. Graham had built his life on control, on eliminating variables, on ensuring that emotions never clouded judgment. Love, or whatever people called it, was just another unpredictable variable he couldn't afford. He stood, reaching for his wallet. That's when he heard it. Excuse me, please." A voice, breathless, urgent, cutting through the restaurant's refined atmosphere like a discord in a symphony. Graham turned. A young woman burst through the entrance, rain-soaked and frantic, her hostess uniform clinging to her frame. She clutched the hand of a small girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, who looked equally drenched. The maitre d' moved to intercept them, his face a mask of professional horror at the disruption. "Miss, this is a private establishment. You can't just—" "I'm so sorry." The woman's eyes swept the restaurant desperately, landing on Graham. For a split second, their gazes locked. Her eyes were the color of warm honey, wide with something between panic and determination. "I'm looking for someone. Table 17? Philippe gestured reluctantly toward Graham, clearly uncertain whether to call security or handle this delicately given who was involved. The woman rushed forward, the little girl's hand still firmly in hers, leaving a trail of rainwater across Amelie's pristine hardwood floors. She stopped 3 feet from Graham's table, chest heaving, mascara slightly smudged, her dark hair escaping from what had probably been a neat bun hours ago. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, meeting his eyes with unexpected directness. "Please forgive me." Graham stared at her, his mind, usually so quick to process, analyze, categorize, going completely blank. This wasn't Sophia Martinez. This was a hostess from the restaurant still wearing her name tag, Vanessa, and she had a child with her. Cliffhanger. The little girl tugged on Vanessa's sleeve, whispering something Graham couldn't hear. Vanessa's jaw tightened, a flash of something fierce and protective crossing her features. She looked back at Graham, and in that moment he saw something he recognized, the same desperation he'd seen in his own eyes years ago, before the money, before the empire, when he was just a kid from nowhere trying to survive. "Please," she repeated, quieter now. "Just, please let me explain." Behind them, Philippe cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, shall I have security?" Graham raised one hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Vanessa's face. "Sit down," he said. Retention hook. Immediate tension. Vanessa Chen hadn't planned to ruin a billionaire's evening. Then again, she hadn't planned for any of the disasters that had unfolded in the past 48 hours either. She slid into the chair across from Graham Hale, acutely aware of the water dripping from her uniform onto Amelie's expensive upholstery. Her daughter, Lily, climbed into the seat beside her, small hands clutching a worn stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Around them, the restaurant had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when something wildly out of place disrupts carefully maintained order. Graham studied her with those penetrating gray eyes, the kind that probably dissected quarterly reports and crushed competitors' spirits with equal efficiency. Vanessa had seen his face before, of course. Everyone who worked at Amelie's knew Graham Hale. He'd been coming here for years, always alone, always ordering the same thing, always leaving exactly a 23% tip, precise, controlled, untouchable, until tonight, when she'd gambled everything on a single desperate lie. "You're not Sophia Martinez," Graham said. It wasn't a question. No. Vanessa's voice was steadier than she felt. "I'm not." "Then who are you, and why did you just claim to be my date?" Before Vanessa could answer, Philippe appeared at Graham's shoulder, his refined composure barely concealing his outrage. "Mr. Hale, I must apologize for this disruption. Miss Chen was one of our hostesses. I assure you this behavior is completely—" "Was?" Graham's attention shifted to the maître d'. Philippe's lips thinned. "Miss Chen was terminated this evening. She is no longer employed by this establishment and has no business being here. I'll have security escort her out immediately." "Mommy?" Lily's small voice cut through the tension. The little girl's dark eyes, so much like her mother's, were filling with tears. "Are we in trouble?" Vanessa's hand found her daughter's, squeezing gently. "It's okay, baby, everything's okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing had been okay since the hospital called yesterday morning. Graham raised his hand again, stopping Philippe mid-gesture toward the security station. "Give us a moment. Mr. Hale, I really must insist." "Philippe," one word, delivered with absolute authority. "A moment, please." The maitre d' retreated, though his disapproving glare could have frozen the Hudson River. The surrounding diners pretended to return to their meals, but Vanessa could feel their attention, like heat lamps. She was the evening's entertainment now, the crazy hostess who'd crashed a billionaire's date with her kid in tow. Graham leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. You have 60 seconds to explain, starting now. 60 seconds. Vanessa had rehearsed a dozen versions of this conversation in the 15-minute sprint from the hospital to the restaurant, but none of them seemed adequate now, sitting across from a man whose net worth probably exceeded the GDP of small nations. My mother had a stroke yesterday, she began, the words tumbling out faster than she intended. She's at Mount Sinai right now, stable, but they're saying she needs surgery. Soon. And the insurance, it won't cover even half of it. The bills are already over $200,000, and that's before the surgery, before rehab, before... She stopped herself, aware she was rambling. Lily's hand tightened in hers. Graham's expression remained unreadable. And this concerns me. How? I was working tonight. Double shift. I needed the money. Vanessa's throat tightened. But then Philippe caught me taking pictures. Pictures? Of the restaurant? The decorations, the table settings, the menu presentation. Vanessa could feel the heat rising to her cheeks. I was going to post them on my social media. I've been building a following, food styling, event planning tips. Nothing huge, but enough that companies have started reaching out. Small sponsorships, a few $100s here and there. Every bit helps with my mom's medical bills, and I thought, you thought you could monetize proprietary restaurant presentation without permission. Graham finished, his tone flat. I thought I could feed my daughter and save my mother. Vanessa shot back, then immediately regretted it. You didn't challenge men like Graham Hale, not if you had any sense of self-preservation, but instead of anger, something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or assessment. Philippe fired you on the spot, Graham concluded. Vanessa nodded. 2 years of perfect attendance, excellent reviews, never a single complaint. Gone in 30 seconds because I took a few pictures. Still doesn't explain why you're sitting at my table pretending to be my date. This was it. The moment of truth. Vanessa took a breath. I was leaving through the back entrance when I overheard Philippe talking to one of the servers. He said Graham Hale had been stood up, that you'd been waiting almost an hour, that it was unprecedented. And then he said, she hesitated. He said you'd probably leave a substantial tip anyway because you always do, even when things go wrong. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. So, you saw an opportunity. I saw a chance. Vanessa corrected. Maybe my only chance. I thought, if I could just talk to you, explain my situation, maybe you'd understand, maybe you'd give you money. His voice had gone cold. You thought you'd prey on my embarrassment, my situation, to extract charity. No. The word came out too loud. Lily flinched and Vanessa immediately softened her tone. No, that's not. I wasn't trying to prey on anything. I just thought maybe, if you knew what was happening, if you understood that I'm not some scammer or opportunist, that I'm just a mother trying to save her own mother, that maybe... She stopped. What had she thought? That a billionaire would open his wallet because she told him a sad story? That Graham Hale, famous for his ruthlessness, would suddenly develop a conscience? The silence stretched between them like broken glass. You made a serious miscalculation, Graham said finally. Vanessa's stomach dropped. Of course she had. This was Graham Hale, the man who'd built an empire by eliminating weaknesses, by never letting sentiment cloud judgment. She'd read the articles. She knew his reputation. What had she been thinking? I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. This was stupid. I'll go. She stood, pulling Lily up with her. The little girl's rabbit dropped to the floor. As Vanessa bent to retrieve it, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Sit down. Vanessa froze, the rabbit in her hand. I said sit down, Graham repeated. We're not finished. Slowly, Vanessa sank back into her chair. Lily climbed into her lap this time, small arms wrapping around her mother's neck. Across the table, Graham was studying them both with an intensity that made Vanessa's skin prickle. Your mother? He said. What's her name? Margaret. Margaret Chen. And the stroke? When exactly did it happen? Yesterday morning around 8 a.m. She was making breakfast for Lily before I left for my first shift. Graham pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. Mount Sinai, you said? Yes, but which floor? Neurology, 5th floor, room 512. But Mr. Hale, I don't understand. How old is your daughter? The question caught Vanessa off guard. She's 5, just turned 5 last month. Graham's eyes moved to Lily, who had buried her face in her mother's shoulder. For a moment, something shifted in his expression. Not quite softening, but something less rigid, less controlled. And her father? Not in the picture. Vanessa's voice carried an edge of defiance. Never has been. Graham nodded slowly, as if confirming some internal calculation. He set his phone face down on the table and leaned forward, elbows resting on either side of his untouched water glass. I'm going to tell you something, Miss Chen. Something I don't generally share. His voice had dropped lower, forcing Vanessa to lean in to hear him over the restaurant's ambient noise. When I was 7 years old, my mother had a stroke. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. My father had left 2 years prior. We had no insurance, no savings, no family nearby. The hospital bills destroyed us. Vanessa's breath caught. This wasn't what she'd expected. She survived, Graham continued, but she was never the same. Paralyzed on her left side, slurred speech, needed round-the-clock care we couldn't afford. I watched my mother, a woman who'd been vibrant, strong, independent, reduced to depending on a 10-year-old boy to help her eat, to dress her, to manage medications whose names I couldn't even pronounce. He paused, and for just a second, the mask slipped. Vanessa saw the ghost of that 10-year-old boy, desperate and terrified and drowning in responsibility no child should bear. She died when I was 14, Graham said, not from the stroke, but from the complications that followed because we couldn't afford proper treatment. I swore that day that I would never be powerless again, that I would never be in a position where money, or the lack of it, could take away someone I loved. Lily had lifted her head from Vanessa's shoulder, watching Graham with wide, curious eyes. I'm sorry, Vanessa whispered. I had no idea. How could you? Graham's voice returned to its normal, controlled tone. It's not in my official biography, not something I discuss in board meetings or magazine interviews. Then why, tell me? Micro cliffhanger. Graham picked up his phone again, typing something Vanessa couldn't see. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable once more, but there was something different in his eyes now. A decision made. Because, Miss Chen, you did something tonight that very few people have ever done to me. You told me the truth when a lie would have been easier. You admitted your desperation instead of dressing it up in pretty words. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a contact form, blank and waiting. Put in your information, all of it. Your mother's full name, her medical record number if you have it, the treating physicians, everything. Vanessa stared at the phone like it might explode. Why? What are you? I'm going to make a call, Graham said simply. And then we're going to have dinner. Dinner? Yes, Miss Chen. Dinner. After all, I did make a reservation. Retention hook. Immediate development. Vanessa's hands trembled as she entered her mother's information into Graham Hale's phone. The device felt impossibly expensive in her grip. Sleek, cold, probably worth more than 3 months of her former salary. Around them, the restaurant had resumed its normal rhythm, though she could still feel curious glances sliding their way like oil on water. Lily had grown quiet in her lap, exhausted from the evening's chaos. The little girl's wet clothes were leaving damp patches on Vanessa's uniform, but neither of them cared anymore. They'd crossed so far beyond the realm of normal that wet clothes seemed like the least of their concerns. Done, Vanessa said, sliding the phone back across the pristine white tablecloth. Graham picked it up, his eyes scanning the information with the focused intensity of someone reading a corporate merger agreement. Then, without a word, he stood and walked away from the table, phone pressed to his ear. Vanessa watched him disappear toward the restaurant's private corridor, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she just done? Given a complete stranger, albeit a famous one, access to her mother's private medical information? What if this was some elaborate game? What if he was calling security instead of whatever he'd implied? Is that man going to help Grandma? Lily's voice was small, uncertain. I don't know, baby. Vanessa kissed the top of her daughter's head, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo mixed with rain. I really don't know. Philippe appeared at her elbow, his presence radiating disapproval like cologne. Miss Chen, perhaps you should... Wait. The word came from a server Vanessa recognized. Marcus, a veteran waiter who'd worked at Amelie's for over a decade. He held 2 menus and wore an expression of barely concealed amusement. Mr. Hale instructed me to take your order while he handles his call. He was quite specific about it. Philippe's face went through a fascinating series of contortions. He what? He said, and I quote, bring them menus, take their order, and make sure the child gets whatever she wants. Marcus set the menus down with a flourish. So, ladies, what can I get you? Vanessa opened her menu and immediately regretted it. The prices weren't listed, never a good sign, but she recognized Amelie's reputation. Appetizers here probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. I don't think... Mommy, they have mac and cheese. Lily had grabbed the children's menu Marcus produced, her face lighting up for the first time that evening. Can I have mac and cheese? Sweetheart, I don't know if we should... Mr. Hale was very clear, Marcus interrupted gently. His eyes, Vanessa noticed, held a kindness that Philippe's lacked. Whatever you want. His treat. Philippe made a strangled sound and stalked away, muttering something in French that was probably not complimentary. Vanessa looked down at the children's menu. Even here, even in the simplified version designed for young palates, the options were absurd. Truffle mac and cheese, Wagyu beef sliders, organic chicken tenders with 3 signature dipping sauces. The mac and cheese, please, Lily announced with the solemnity of someone ordering at a drive-thru. And chocolate milk. Marcus smiled. Excellent choice, mademoiselle. And for you, miss? I'm not hungry, Vanessa started to say, but her stomach chose that moment to betray her with an audible growl. She hadn't eaten since grabbing a granola bar that morning, 16 hours and a lifetime ago. Just, water is fine. The lady will have the seared salmon with autumn vegetables, a voice said behind her. Vanessa turned to find Graham returning to the table, his phone nowhere in sight. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture had loosened slightly, as if he'd just won a negotiation or solved a complex problem. I don't need, Vanessa began. It's not about need, Miss Chen. Graham reclaimed his seat across from her. You haven't eaten today, you're exhausted and you need your strength. The salmon is excellent here, trust me. Marcus nodded approvingly. And for you, sir? Your usual? Yes. Thank you, Marcus. As the waiter departed, silence settled over their table. Lily had discovered a small box of crayons that Marcus had left with the children's menu, and was now coloring with intense concentration, her earlier tears forgotten in the simple pleasure of creating. Vanessa watched her daughter's small hands work, grateful for the momentary distraction. I made 3 calls, Graham said finally. Vanessa's attention snapped back to him. 3? First, to Dr. Sarah Brennan. She's the chief of neurosurgery at Mount Sinai and happens to owe me a favor. I funded a wing of their research center 2 years ago. She's reviewing your mother's case tonight. If the surgery is necessary, she'll perform it herself. Vanessa's vision blurred. I don't understand. Why would you? Second call was to my attorney. He's drafting a medical financial assistance agreement. All of your mother's current and future bills related to this stroke will be covered through a foundation I maintain for exactly these purposes. You'll need to sign some paperwork, but it's straightforward. Mr. Hale, Graham. If we're having dinner together, you should call me Graham. Graham. Vanessa's voice cracked on his name. This is too much. I can't possibly accept. The third call, Graham continued as if she hadn't spoken, was to my sister Caroline. She's a partner at a boutique event planning firm in Tribeca. They're always looking for talented people with an eye for aesthetic presentation and social media savvy. I believe you mentioned building a following? Vanessa could only stare at him. This wasn't happening. Things like this didn't happen in real life. Billionaires didn't swoop in and solve all your problems because you crashed their failed date with a desperate lie. I don't understand, she whispered. Why are you doing this? Graham's fingers drummed once against the tablecloth, a brief crack in his otherwise perfect composure. Would you believe me if I said I don't entirely understand it myself? No, he almost smiled. Almost. Smart answer. Their food arrived with the impeccable timing that only the finest restaurants achieve. Lily's mac and cheese came in a small copper pot, the top golden and bubbling with what was definitely not the boxed version they survived on at home. Vanessa's salmon was a work of art, perfectly seared, surrounded by roasted vegetables so colorful they looked painted. Graham's meal was simpler, a perfectly grilled steak, medium rare with a side of asparagus. No sauce, no garnish, nothing fancy, utilitarian, efficient. Eat, he instructed. Vanessa picked up her fork, acutely aware that she was still wearing her damp hostess uniform, that her hair was a disaster, that she probably looked like exactly what she was, a desperate woman who'd crashed a stranger's evening out of pure panic. And yet Graham was looking at her with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite curiosity, something more complex. The salmon melted on her tongue so perfectly cooked she wanted to cry. When had she last eaten food that wasn't reheated leftovers or whatever Lily didn't finish? Mommy, this is the best mac and cheese ever, Lily announced, her face smeared with cheese sauce. Use your napkin, baby, Vanessa said automatically. but she was smiling. Her daughter was smiling. For just this moment, the crushing weight of medical bills and lost jobs and uncertain futures had lifted enough to let them breathe. "So," Graham said, cutting his steak with precise movements, "tell me about your social media presence. What kind of following have you built?" It took Vanessa a moment to shift mental gears. "It's not huge, maybe 15,000 followers across platforms. I started it about a year ago, just posting pictures of Lily's birthday parties, holiday decorations I'd make from thrift store finds, budget-friendly tablescapes, that kind of thing. 15,000 is respectable for organic growth." Graham's tone had shifted into something more businesslike, more comfortable perhaps. "Engagement rates? Around 7% on Instagram, higher on TikTok. Some of my videos have gone semi-viral. Nothing huge, but enough to catch attention from smaller brands. And the monetization?" Vanessa set down her fork, drawn into the conversation despite herself. "Mostly sponsored posts, a few $100s here and there. I did a partnership with a budget home goods store last month that paid $1,000. It's not much, but every bit helps with..." She stopped, suddenly embarrassed. Graham probably spent $1,000 on tie clips, but he was nodding thoughtfully, his business mind clearly engaged. "You have an authentic voice. That's rare. Most influencers are selling fantasy. You're selling achievability. There's a market for that, a large one actually. People who want beauty but can't afford the usual price tag. That's exactly what I'm trying to do," Vanessa said, surprised by how accurately he'd summarized her entire concept. "Caroline's firm could use someone like you. They cater to high-end clients, but there's been a growing demand for events that look expensive but aren't. Corporate parties with budget constraints, nonprofit galas, that sort of thing. Your skill set would be valuable." "Is this a job offer?" Vanessa asked carefully. "It's an opportunity for an interview. What you do with it is up to you." Graham's eyes met hers directly. "I don't believe in handouts, Miss Chen. I believe in recognizing potential and providing opportunities. What you've built on your own, with limited resources and while working multiple jobs and raising a daughter, that demonstrates initiative, creativity, and resilience. Those are qualities worth investing in." Lily had finished her mac and cheese and was now creating an elaborate crayon drawing. Vanessa glanced at it. It appeared to be the three of them at this table, rendered in the chaotic but earnest style of 5-year-old art. "I need to ask," Vanessa said quietly, "is this because of what you told me about your mother? Are you doing this because you see yourself in my situation?" Graham was silent for a long moment, his steak forgotten. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement in blurred halos of gold and red. "Partially," he admitted, "but it's more than that. Do you know what happened to me after my mother died?" Vanessa shook her head. "I became angry, furiously, destructively angry. I blamed the world, the system, the randomness of it all. I channeled that anger into ambition, into building something that would make me invulnerable to the kind of helplessness I'd experienced. And I succeeded. By any measurable metric, I succeeded spectacularly." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But somewhere in that process, I forgot how to be anything other than successful. I optimized my life like a business, eliminated inefficiencies, removed variables. I became exactly what those articles call me, a machine. Effective, but isolated." "Your sister set up tonight's date," Vanessa guessed. "Caroline's been trying to fix my life for years. She thinks I need connection, warmth, all those messy human things that complicate clean profit margins." Graham's voice carried a note of self-deprecation that Vanessa hadn't expected. "She's probably right, but I've never known how to do it. How to let someone in when your entire identity is built on walls. And then I showed up," Vanessa said softly, understanding dawning. "A complete disaster. Messy, complicated. All the things you've spent years avoiding." "Yes." Graham met her eyes again. "And instead of irritating me the way it should have, the way it always has before, it felt real. You felt real." Emotional cliffhanger. "Look what I drew." Lily held up her picture proudly. In her child's rendering, Vanessa and Graham sat on opposite sides of a table with Lily between them, all three figures smiling under what appeared to be a very enthusiastic sun, despite the indoor setting. Above them, she'd written in wobbly letters, "My new friends." Graham stared at the drawing, something unreadable crossing his face. When he looked back at Vanessa, his carefully controlled expression had cracked just slightly. "Your daughter," he said quietly, "just called me her friend. She doesn't have many," Vanessa admitted. Between my work schedule and daycare, she doesn't get much social interaction. Neither do I, Graham said. And then so quietly, Vanessa almost missed it. Neither do I. Retention hook. Time jump. Pulse new tension. 3 weeks later, Vanessa stood in the marble lobby of the Hale Industries headquarters building, feeling like an imposter in borrowed armor. The charcoal suit Caroline had insisted she buy for today's meeting fit perfectly, tailored to hide the fact that Vanessa had lost 12 pounds she couldn't afford to lose over the past month. Her hair was pulled back in a professional chignon. Her makeup was subtle but polished. On paper, she looked like she belonged in this temple of steel and glass that pierced the Manhattan skyline like a declaration of dominance. On the inside, she was still the desperate hostess who'd crashed a billionaire's dinner 3 weeks ago. "You'll be fine," Caroline Hale Morrison said beside her, reading Vanessa's anxiety with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime managing her brother's emotional blind spots. She was everything the family resemblance suggested: sharp features, intelligent eyes, impeccable taste. But where Graham's demeanor was winter, Caroline's was spring, warm, but with steel underneath. "He's in a mood today," Caroline continued, guiding Vanessa toward the executive elevators. 3 acquisitions fell through this week. His board is questioning his latest pivot strategy, and the Wall Street Journal published another profile calling him the loneliest titan in New York. "He'll be insufferable." Vanessa's stomach knotted. She hadn't seen Graham since that night at Amelie's. He'd been true to his word. Dr. Brennan had performed her mother's surgery the very next day, a complete success. The medical bills had vanished as if they'd never existed. Caroline had hired Vanessa at her event planning firm, where she'd spent 3 weeks learning the industry from the ground up while juggling her mother's rehabilitation and Lily's schedule. Graham had orchestrated all of it from a distance, communicating through assistants and attorneys, never once making direct contact. Vanessa had sent thank you notes, tried calling, even attempted to reach out through Caroline. Nothing. It was as if that night had been a dream, and Graham Hale had returned to being the untouchable figure on magazine covers. Until yesterday, when Caroline had summoned her with urgent news. "Graham wants to see you. Tomorrow, his office, 10 a.m. Don't be late." The elevator doors opened on the 47th floor, revealing a reception area that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought warmth was a weakness. Everything was chrome, glass, and sharp angles. The receptionist looked up from her desk, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw Vanessa. "Ms. Chen and Ms. Hale Morrison for Mr. Hale," Caroline announced with the confidence of someone who'd been breezing past security checkpoints since childhood. "Of course. He's expecting you." The receptionist's eyes lingered on Vanessa with undisguised curiosity. Word had clearly spread about the mysterious woman from the restaurant incident. They walked down a corridor lined with awards, magazine covers featuring Graham's face, and photographs of buildings bearing the Hale Industries logo across 3 continents. Each image was a monument to success, control, perfection. Vanessa felt smaller with every step. "Caroline," she whispered urgently, "why am I here? You said he wanted to see me, but you never explained why." Caroline's expression turned sympathetic. "Because my brother is an idiot who doesn't know how to ask for help, even when he desperately needs it." Before Vanessa could respond, they arrived at a set of imposing double doors. Caroline knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Graham's office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Manhattan that made Vanessa's breath catch. The desk was an architectural statement piece, minimalist and imposing. Behind it sat Graham Hale, looking exactly as controlled and polished as the magazine cover suggested. His attention focused on 3 computer monitors displaying what appeared to be financial data. He didn't look up when they entered. "You're 3 minutes late," he said to the monitors. "You're welcome," Caroline replied cheerfully, settling into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "I brought you a present." Graham's eyes finally lifted, finding Vanessa standing awkwardly near the door. For just a fraction of a second, his controlled expression cracked. Surprise, maybe, or something softer, before the mask snapped back into place. "Miss Chen," he stood, buttoning his suit jacket with mechanical precision. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't aware I had a choice," Vanessa said, then immediately regretted the sharpness in her tone. But something about his distant formality after everything that had happened made her angry. A ghost of something, amusement, flickered in Graham's eyes. "Please sit." Caroline made a show of checking her phone. "Oh, look at that. I have an urgent call I need to take in my office on a different floor. I'll just leave you two to talk." She was out the door before either of them could protest. The silence that followed her exit was suffocating. Vanessa lowered herself into the chair Caroline had vacated, hyper-aware of how out of place she felt in this monument to corporate achievement. Graham remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city below. "How is your mother?" he asked finally. "Recovering well. Dr. Brennan says she's ahead of schedule. She should be able to come home next week." Vanessa paused. "Thanks to you. And Lily?" "Adjusting. She asks about you sometimes. Wants to know if her friend Mr. Graham is coming to visit." Graham's jaw tightened. "I've been busy. I noticed." The words came out harder than intended. "Too busy to return a phone call? Too busy to acknowledge the thank you notes I sent? Too busy to—" She stopped herself, taking a breath. "I'm sorry. I have no right to judge how you spend your time. You've already done more than anyone could ever expect." "You're angry with me." "I'm confused," Vanessa corrected. "That night at the restaurant you told me things you said you never tell anyone. You helped my family in ways I can never repay. And then you just disappeared. Went back to being the untouchable Graham Hale that everyone writes articles about." Graham turned to face her, and Vanessa was startled to see exhaustion etched into his features. The perfectly controlled exterior couldn't quite hide the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "I didn't know what to do with you," he admitted quietly. "With me? With how you made me feel." He moved to his desk, gripping its edge as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "That night was supposed to be another failure in a long line of Caroline's attempts to fix my personal life. Instead, it became something else. Something that didn't fit into any category I understand." Vanessa waited, sensing there was more. "I've built my entire existence on control, Miss Chen. On eliminating variables, managing risk, ensuring predictable outcomes. And then you walked into that restaurant, soaking wet, desperate, completely unplanned. And for the first time in decades, I didn't want to eliminate the variable I wanted." He trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. "What did you want?" Vanessa asked softly. "To see what would happen if I didn't." Graham's gray eyes met hers with unexpected vulnerability. "But I didn't know how. Every instinct I've honed over 42 years told me to handle it the way I handle everything. Write a check, delegate the problem, maintain professional distance. So that's what I did. You sent me away. I protected myself," Graham corrected. "Which is what I always do, what I've always had to do." Vanessa stood, crossing to the window where he stood. From this height, the city looked like a circuit board, ordered and logical, nothing like the messy reality at street level. "Why did you ask me here today?" she asked. Graham reached for a folder on his desk, sliding it across to her. Inside were architectural renderings. A building, modern and elegant, with what appeared to be event spaces, commercial kitchens, and creative studios. "This is the old Riverside Manufacturing Building in Brooklyn," Graham explained. "I acquired it 2 years ago with plans to convert it into luxury condos. Standard gentrification playbook. High returns, minimal risk." Vanessa studied the renderings. "These don't look like condos." "They're not. Not anymore." Graham pointed to various features in the design. Event planning studios, commercial kitchen spaces for food entrepreneurs, photography studios, co-working areas specifically designed for creative professionals who are building businesses on limited budgets, affordable rental rates, built-in mentorship programs. "This is beautiful," Vanessa breathed. "But why are you showing me?" "Because I want you to run it." The words landed like a physical blow. Vanessa's head snapped up. "What?" "Caroline tells me you've been exceptional at her firm. Natural talent for design, excellent client management, innovative thinking. But you're underutilized there. This project needs someone who understands both sides, the creative vision and the practical limitations of building something with limited resources." "Graham, I've been in event planning for 3 weeks. I can't possibly." "You've been building a business from nothing while working multiple jobs and raising a child alone," Graham interrupted. "That requires more skill than most MBA programs teach. This project needs someone who knows what it's like to fight for every opportunity, who understands the people this space is designed to serve." Vanessa looked back at the renderings, her mind racing. "This isn't just about me, is it? This is about what you said at dinner. About being angry after your mother died, about channeling it into something. Perhaps," Graham's voice was carefully neutral, "or perhaps I'm simply making a sound business decision. The gentrification model is played out. There's more long-term value in community investment, in creating opportunities rather than displacing them." "You're lying." The words escaped before Vanessa could stop them. Graham's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" You're giving me the corporate justification because it's safer than admitting you're doing this because you care. Because that night at the restaurant cracked something open that you've kept locked away for years. Vanessa moved closer, emboldened by something she couldn't quite name. You said I felt real. Well, this feels real too. This matters to you, not as an investment but as something personal. For a long moment, Graham simply stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed. A short, sharp sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. My board would have a collective aneurysm if they heard you talk to me like that. Maybe they should talk to you like that more often. Maybe. Graham's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The project timeline is aggressive. We break ground next month. I need someone to oversee the entire creative development, the programming, the vendor selection, the community outreach. It's a massive undertaking. I have a 5-year-old daughter and a mother in rehabilitation, Vanessa pointed out. How am I supposed to? Flexible hours. On-site childcare once the building opens. Competitive salary with performance bonuses. Full benefits including health insurance that will cover your mother's ongoing treatment. Graham rattled off the terms like a contract negotiation. And before you argue, know that Caroline has already agreed to transition you out of her firm with full support. She's been in on this plan since I conceived it 2 weeks ago. Vanessa's head was spinning. 2 weeks ago? But you haven't contacted me in 3 weeks. I was finalizing the details. I wanted to present you with something concrete, not just another vague opportunity. Graham paused. And if I'm being honest, I was terrified. Of what? That you'd say no. That you'd think this was charity dressed up as a job offer. That you'd see through all my carefully constructed business justifications to the truth underneath. Which is? Graham took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice had shed its corporate armor. That I haven't been able to stop thinking about that night. About how a complete stranger and her 5-year-old daughter made me feel more human in 2 hours than I've felt in 20 years. About how you looked at me, not at Graham Hale the billionaire, but at the person underneath all the magazine covers and board meetings. I don't know what to do with that feeling, Miss Chen. I don't know how to categorize it or control it or make it fit into the life I've built. But I know I don't want it to disappear. Major emotional revelation. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unguarded. Vanessa could see the effort it had cost him. Every word a brick removed from walls he'd spent decades building. Lily drew you a picture, Vanessa said quietly. The night after dinner, she made me promise to give it to you. She reached into her bag, pulling out a folded piece of construction paper. Graham took it carefully, unfolding it to reveal another one of Lily's enthusiastic crayon creations. This one showed a tall figure in a suit holding hands with a smaller figure with the words, "Thank you, Mr. Graham," written across the top in Vanessa's handwriting, and "I love you" in Lily's shaky letters below. Graham stared at the picture for a long time, his thumb tracing over the crayon marks. "I don't know how to be this person," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The kind of person who deserves something like this." "Then maybe," Vanessa said gently, "it's time to learn." Retention hook. 6 weeks later, Paul's rising stakes. The headline on the New York Financial Times website was brutal in its directness. Has Graham Hale gone soft? Billionaire's latest project raises questions about strategic direction. Vanessa stared at her laptop screen in the makeshift office they'd set up in the Riverside building, her coffee going cold in her hand. The article's accompanying photo showed Graham at yesterday's press conference, standing beside her as they announced the community center's opening timeline. The photographer had caught him mid-smile, a genuine one, not the practiced corporate expression he usually deployed. As he looked at something Vanessa was saying, the article was scathing. Sources close to Hale Industries board members expressed concern over CEO's recent sentimental investments. The Riverside Community Center project, spearheaded by former restaurant hostess Vanessa Chen, represents a dramatic departure from Hale's typically ruthless profit maximization strategy. With projected returns far below standard Hale Industries benchmarks, insiders question whether the famously calculating billionaire has developed a blind spot, or perhaps more troublingly, a personal attachment that's clouding his business judgment. "Don't read the comments," Caroline's voice came from the doorway. She held 2 fresh coffees from the cafe down the street, her expression sympathetic. "Trust me on this one." But Vanessa had already scrolled down. The comments section was a cesspool of speculation, each one more invasive than the last. Obviously sleeping with him for the money. Gold Digger 101. Show up with a kid for sympathy points. Hale's having a midlife crisis and we're all going to pay for it when the stock tanks. Vanessa closed the laptop harder than necessary. This is exactly what I was afraid of, which is why Graham is currently in an emergency board meeting trying to contain the damage. Caroline set one of the coffees in front of Vanessa. He anticipated this. The board has been circling since he announced the project. Maybe they're right. Vanessa's voice was tight. Maybe this is a terrible investment. Maybe I'm a terrible investment. Stop that. Caroline's tone carried the sharp edge of someone who didn't tolerate self-pity. In 6 weeks, you've accomplished what would normally take 6 months. You've secured 15 vendor partnerships, designed 3 separate event packages, and your community outreach has resulted in a waiting list of over 200 local entrepreneurs wanting space. The business model is sound, but the returns are lower than Graham's usual projects, yes, but they're stable, sustainable, and here's the part my idiotic brother is terrible at articulating. They matter. Caroline sat on the edge of Vanessa's desk. Do you know what Graham told me last week? Vanessa shook her head. He said this is the first project in 20 years that he actually cares about, not just as a line item on a portfolio, but as something real, something that means something. Caroline's expression softened. That terrifies him, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. Before Vanessa could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's physical therapist. Margaret had a setback today. Nothing serious, but she's discouraged. Might help if you stopped by. Vanessa closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of too many responsibilities and not enough time settle over her shoulders. She'd promised Lily she'd pick her up early from after-school care today. She had a vendor meeting in 2 hours. The electricians needed decisions about the kitchen studio lighting, and now her mother needed her. Go, Caroline said, reading the situation instantly. I'll handle the vendor meeting. Caroline, you have your own business to run, which is currently in excellent shape thanks to my extremely competent staff. Go see your mother. Tell her the center is naming one of the kitchen studios after her, the Margaret Chen Culinary Studio. Graham approved it this morning. Vanessa's throat tightened. He did? He's been planning it for weeks. Wanted it to be a surprise for the grand opening, but I think your mother could use the boost now. Caroline stood, squeezing Vanessa's shoulder. Despite what those vultures write, my brother knows exactly what he's doing. He always has. Scene shift. Graham's perspective. The Hale Industries boardroom felt like a courtroom, and Graham was definitely the defendant. 12 faces stared at him from around the obsidian conference table, each one representing millions in investment capital and decades of business experience. They'd made him rich, they'd trusted his vision. And now, if their expressions were any indication, they were questioning whether that trust had been misplaced. Let me be clear, said Richard Thornton, the board's longest-serving member and Graham's most vocal critic. He was 68, gray-haired, and had the kind of old money confidence that came from never having experienced real failure.
This isn't about the Riverside project specifically. It's about a pattern of behavior that has this board concerned about your judgment. What pattern? Graham's voice was dangerously calm. Thornton slid a folder across the table.
Inside were photos. Graham and Vanessa at the press conference leaving the construction site together, having coffee at a cafe near the building. Someone had been following them. You've become personally involved with the project manager, Thornton stated flatly. A woman with no formal experience, no education in the field, and a personal history that makes her a liability. Graham's hands clenched beneath the table. Ms. Chen's qualifications are irrelevant to the point I'm making. Thornton leaned forward. Graham, we've watched you build this company with mathematical precision. You don't make emotional decisions. You don't take on projects with subpar returns. You certainly don't hire people based on personal connections formed during chance encounters. The Riverside project is solid, Graham said, forcing his voice to remain level. The market analysis shows 7% returns over 10 years. Another board member interrupted. Patricia Chen, no relation to Vanessa, was the newest addition to the board and one of its sharpest minds. That's respectable for a community investment, Graham, but it's not a Hale Industries project. We expect minimum 15%, preferably 20%. You know this. Perhaps my expectations have evolved, Graham replied. The room went silent. In 15 years of board meetings, Graham had never said anything like that. Evolved? Thornton's voice dripped with disdain. Or been compromised? Careful, Richard. No, I won't be careful. This board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. We can't sit by while you pursue vanity projects to impress some woman who... Graham stood so abruptly, his chair rolled backward. Finish that sentence very carefully. Thornton didn't flinch. The optics are terrible, Graham. A billionaire CEO suddenly developing a social conscience right after meeting an attractive woman in financial distress? The press is having a field day, our stock is down 3%, and your credibility is being questioned in every major financial publication. My credibility, Graham said quietly, has built this company from 30 million to 30 billion in 15 years. I've never missed a projection, never failed to deliver returns, never made a strategic error that cost this board money. Are we really having this conversation because I'm finally investing in something beyond quarterly earnings? We're having this conversation, Patricia said more gently, because you're different, Graham. We've all noticed it. You smile now. You leave the office before midnight. You talk about things other than market positions and acquisition targets. And while personally, I think that's probably healthy, professionally, I'm concerned you're making decisions with your heart instead of your head. Thornton finished. And for someone in your position, that's dangerous. Graham looked around the table, seeing the doubt in their faces. These were people who'd trusted him, believed in him, made fortunes alongside him, and now they were looking at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. I'm not abandoning the core business, Graham said finally. The acquisitions pipeline is still robust. Q4 projections are strong. The Riverside project represents less than 0.3% of our total portfolio. Then why? Thornton asked. Are you spending 30% of your time on it? Because it matters, Graham wanted to say. Because for the first time in 20 years, I wake up thinking about something other than market share. Because a 5-year-old girl drew me a picture and called me her friend. And I didn't realize how desperately lonely I'd been until that moment. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he said, because it's a strategic expansion into a market segment we've ignored. Community investment builds brand reputation, which has long-term value beyond immediate returns. It was the right answer. The corporate answer. The kind of answer that had served him well for 2 decades. It was also a lie, and from the looks on their faces, they knew it. We're not shutting the project down, Patricia said carefully, but we are asking you to step back from day-to-day involvement. Let Ms. Chen run it as intended. Maintain professional distance, and for God's sake, stop appearing in photographs with her that make you look like you're dating your employee. I'm not, Graham started, then stopped. Was he? They'd had coffee 3 times this week. He'd started finding excuses to visit the construction site. He'd personally approved every design decision Vanessa presented, not because they were all perfect, but because he trusted her instincts in a way he'd never trusted anyone's before. The board will reconvene in 30 days, Thornton announced, standing. We expect to see a revised involvement strategy for the Riverside project, and a return to the leadership style that made this company successful. Are we clear? It wasn't really a question. Scene shift. The confrontation. Vanessa found Graham on the Riverside building's roof deck 3 hours later, standing at the railing and staring out at the Brooklyn skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost absurdly beautiful given the day they'd both had. Caroline told me about the board meeting, she said quietly, approaching him. Graham didn't turn. Of course she did. She's worried about you. Caroline's always worried about me. It's her default state. Vanessa stood beside him at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. They want you to distance yourself from the project, from me. Yes, maybe they're right. Now Graham did turn, his gray eyes finding hers with unsettling intensity. You think I should walk away? I think, Vanessa said carefully, that I've watched you pour everything into this project. I've seen how much it means to you. And I think if my presence is threatening that, if I'm the reason your board is questioning you, then maybe... Don't. Graham's voice was sharp. Don't make yourself small to make other people comfortable. I've spent 20 years doing that dance, Vanessa. Becoming exactly what everyone expected. The ruthless CEO, the calculating businessman. The man who cares about nothing but the bottom line. He paused, his jaw tightening. And I was miserable. Every single day I was successful and miserable. Graham, you asked me once why I helped you that night at the restaurant. The truth is, I helped myself. You walked into my carefully controlled life with your daughter and your desperation and your honesty, and you showed me that there was still a person under all the corporate armor, someone who could feel something other than the satisfaction of a successful acquisition. Vanessa's heart was hammering. What are you saying? I'm saying the board can question my judgment all they want. They can threaten and demand and try to force me back into the box I've lived in for 2 decades. Graham reached out, his hand covering hers on the railing. But I'm not going anywhere. Not from this project, not from... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Not from what? Vanessa whispered. Graham's thumb traced across her knuckles, the touch sending electricity up her arm. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person who lets someone in. But I'm tired of being alone, Vanessa. I'm tired of perfect dinners at expensive restaurants with women who see me as a portfolio rather than a person. I'm tired of waking up in a penthouse that feels like a mausoleum. I'm tired of... His phone buzzed. Then again. Then a third time in rapid succession. Graham pulled it out, his expression darkening as he read the screen. Damn it. What's wrong? He showed her the phone. 3 news alerts, all variations on the same theme. Breaking. Hale Industries stock drops 5% amid leadership concerns. Major investors call for emergency shareholder meeting. Is Graham Hale's personal life destroying his business empire? This is my fault, Vanessa said, feeling sick. I should never have... Stop. Graham pocketed his phone. This isn't about you. It's about me finally choosing something for myself instead of letting other people's expectations dictate every decision. The board is panicking because they don't understand that version of Graham Hale. Wall Street is reacting because uncertainty scares them. But the fundamentals are sound. The business is strong. They'll realize that. And if they don't? Graham's expression was unreadable in the fading light. Then I'll deal with the consequences. But I won't deal with them by pushing you away. I won't deal with them by pretending that the past 6 weeks haven't been the most real thing I've experienced in 20 years. Massive cliffhanger. Vanessa's phone rang, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen. Lily's after-school program. Her heart stopped. Ms. Chen? The director's voice was tight with controlled panic. I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's been an incident. Lily is fine, she's not hurt, but we need you to come pick her up immediately. There was a man here claiming to be her father. He was very insistent about seeing her, and when we wouldn't allow it, he became aggressive. Security had to escort him out, but Lily witnessed the whole thing and she's very upset. The phone nearly slipped from Vanessa's hand. What man? Lily's father isn't, he's never. He had identification. Said his name was Marcus Chen. He knew details about Lily's birth, about you. Ms. Chen, I think you need to get here right now. Graham was already moving, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. I'm coming with you, he said. And there was something in his voice, something protective and fierce that made it clear this wasn't a request. As they rushed toward the elevator, Vanessa's mind was reeling. Marcus Chen, the man who'd abandoned her when she was 3 months pregnant. The man who'd said he wanted nothing to do with a child. The man who disappeared 6 years ago without a trace. What could possibly bring him back now? Retention hook. Immediate high-stakes action. The after-school program was in controlled chaos when Graham's car screeched to a halt outside. Through the windows, Vanessa could see Lily pressed against the director's side, her face streaked with tears, clutching her worn rabbit like a lifeline. Vanessa was out of the car before it fully stopped, Graham close behind her. Mommy! Lily broke free and ran, throwing herself into Vanessa's arms with such force they both nearly toppled. The little girl was shaking, her sobs muffled against Vanessa's shoulder. I've got you, baby, I've got you. Vanessa held her daughter tight, her own heart hammering against her ribs. Over Lily's head, she met the director's eyes. What happened exactly? Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been running the program for 20 years, looked shaken. He showed up about 30 minutes ago. Tall, early 30s, insisted he was Lily's father. When I said we had no authorized pickup for anyone by that name, he became agitated. Started saying you'd kept his daughter from him, that he had rights. I called security, but before they arrived, he was shouting through the window at Lily, telling her he was her daddy and that mommy had lied to her. Vanessa felt Graham tense beside her, his hand coming to rest protectively on her shoulder. Did he try to take her? Graham's voice was dangerously calm. No, thank God. Our protocols are strict. He never made it past the front desk. But the shouting. Mrs. Patterson's eyes were sympathetic. Lily was terrified. She kept saying she didn't have a daddy, that the man was lying. Graham pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with swift precision. I'm calling my head of security. We need to know who this man is, where he's staying, what he wants. And I want someone watching this facility and Vanessa's apartment building within the hour. Graham, you don't have to... Vanessa started. Yes, I do. His tone left no room for argument. Nobody threatens your daughter. Nobody. 20 minutes later, they were in Vanessa's modest Brooklyn apartment, the first time Graham had been there. Vanessa was acutely aware of how different it was from his world. The furniture was secondhand. The kitchen barely fit 2 people. and Lily's toys were scattered across the small living room. But Graham didn't seem to notice or care. He'd shed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and was currently sitting on the floor helping Lily build a blanket fort while Vanessa made tea with shaking hands. "Is the bad man going to come here?" Lily asked quietly, peering at Graham from beneath a fortress of couch cushions and sheets. "No," Graham said with absolute certainty. "I promise you, Lily. No one is going to hurt you or your mom. I won't let that happen." "Because you're my friend?" Graham's expression softened in a way Vanessa had never seen before. "Yes, because I'm your friend." Lily studied him seriously, then held out her rabbit. "Mr. Cottontail thinks you should stay for dinner. He says you make good forts." "Well," Graham said gravely, accepting the offered rabbit and examining it with appropriate solemnity, "if Mr. Cottontail insists, how can I refuse?" Vanessa watched them from the kitchen doorway, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This was Graham Hale, Forbes's most ruthless CEO, the man whose board was currently questioning his judgment, sitting on her worn carpet playing with stuffed animals and building pillow forts. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about our daughter. I'm staying at the Marriott on Atlantic, room 847, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone or my next stop is family court." Vanessa's blood ran cold. She was reaching for her phone to show Graham when his own phone rang. He answered immediately, his expression shifting to business mode. "Talk to me," he said, standing and moving toward the window. A pause. "You're sure? I see. No, that changes things. Keep digging. I want to know everything." He ended the call and turned to Vanessa, his face grim. "My security team found him. Marcus Chen, 34, currently unemployed. He's been living in Atlantic City for the past 3 years, working casino jobs until he was fired 6 months ago for gambling debts." "Gambling debts," Vanessa repeated, feeling sick. $50,000 according to my investigator. He's been evading creditors, moving from place to place. Graham's jaw tightened. 3 days ago, the New York Financial Times published that article about you and me, complete with your name, your background, and the fact that you're working on a project funded by a billionaire. Understanding crashed over Vanessa like a wave. He thinks I have money now. He thinks I'm with you, that I can pay off his debts. That would be my assessment. Graham moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "When did he contact you?" Vanessa showed him the text. Graham's expression darkened further. "He's threatening family court," he said flatly, "claiming parental rights to a daughter he's never met, never supported, never acknowledged. This isn't about Lily. This is extortion. He could still get joint custody," Vanessa whispered, her worst fears solidifying into words. "I've read about cases like this. Fathers who come back after years and the courts give them rights anyway. He could force me to share custody, could take her away from me for weekends, for summers. He could—" "Stop." Graham's hands came to her shoulders, steadying her. "We're not going to let that happen." "We?" Vanessa's voice broke on the word. "Graham, this isn't your problem. You're already dealing with your board, with the stock prices, with questions about your judgment. You don't need to take on my mess too." "Your mess?" Graham's voice rose slightly. Then he caught himself, glancing toward where Lily was still occupied with her fort. He lowered his voice, but the intensity remained. "Vanessa, when are you going to understand? This stopped being just about you weeks ago. That little girl in there called me her friend. She trusts me. And you—" He stopped abruptly, seeming to wrestle with something. "Me what?" Vanessa prompted, her heart in her throat. Before Graham could answer, Vanessa's apartment buzzer rang. They both froze. "Are you expecting someone?" Graham asked. "No." Graham moved to the intercom, pressing the button. "Who is it?" "Delivery for Vanessa Chen." A young voice, bored. "Needs signature." Graham exchanged a glance with Vanessa, then spoke into the intercom. "Leave it at the door, we'll get it." "Can't, man, needs signature, I got like 5 more stops." After a tense moment, Graham went down himself, Vanessa watching from the window above. She saw him accept a large envelope from a legitimate-looking courier, sign for it and return. The envelope was from a law firm, Whitmore & Associates. Vanessa's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a petition for emergency custody hearing, filed by Marcus Chen, claiming parental rights and alleging that Vanessa had deliberately kept him from his daughter. The hearing was scheduled for 10 days from now. "He filed before he even contacted you," Graham said, reading over her shoulder. "This was his plan all along. Create panic, force a meeting, probably demand money to drop the suit." Vanessa sank onto her threadbare couch, the papers falling from her hands. I can't afford a lawyer. Not one who could fight this. I've spent everything on my mother's expenses before you helped, and I haven't even started my new salary yet. He knows that. He knows I'm vulnerable. You're not vulnerable, Graham said firmly, sitting beside her. And you're not alone. Graham, your board is already questioning your involvement with me. If you're seen helping me with this, if it looks like you're financially supporting my custody battle, the optics will be, I don't care about the optics. You should. Vanessa's voice rose, frustration and fear making her sharp. You've built everything on your reputation on being the man who makes calculated decisions. And here I am, dragging you into personal drama that could cost you everything. The board meeting, the stock prices, the investors. Graham, I can't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. You're not listening to me. Graham's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I don't care, do you understand? I don't care about the board's opinion or the stock price or what some journalist writes about my strategic direction. I care about you. I care about Lily. And I'm not going to stand by while some deadbeat gambler tries to extort you using your own daughter as leverage. Why? Vanessa whispered. Why would you risk everything for us? Because, Graham said, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no corporate polish, no calculated control, just raw honesty. I'm in love with you. And I think I have been since you walked into that restaurant soaking wet and desperate and more real than anyone I'd met in 20 years. The world seemed to stop. Outside, Brooklyn traffic hummed. Inside the apartment, Lily was singing softly to her rabbit. And between them, everything had just changed. You can't be, Vanessa said, but there were tears in her eyes. We barely know each other. It's been 6 weeks. I know that you take your coffee with too much sugar and drink it cold because you're too busy taking care of everyone else to reheat it. I know you have a scar on your left hand from when Lily was learning to walk, and you caught her before she hit a table corner. I know you hum when you're concentrating, always the same song. That Beatles one, Here Comes the Sun. I know you're terrified of failure, but you're more terrified of not trying. I know you love your daughter and your mother with a fierceness that makes my chest hurt, because I don't think anyone has ever loved me like that. Vanessa was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I'm a single mother with a mountain of problems and a deadbeat ex who just showed up to ruin my life. I work in event planning with no degree, no credentials, nothing. I live in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. I don't fit in your world, Graham. Good, Graham said simply, because I'm tired of my world. I want your world. I want chaotic mornings and pillow forts and a 5-year-old who draws me pictures. I want coffee that gets cold and problems that matter, and someone who looks at me like I'm a person instead of a portfolio. The board will force you out, Vanessa warned. You heard what Thornton said. If you keep prioritizing this us over the business, then they'll force me out. Graham's voice was steady, certain, and I'll start something new, something that matters. Maybe I'll run the Riverside Center myself. Maybe I'll invest in small businesses instead of acquiring and dismantling them. Maybe I'll actually use my money to build something that helps people instead of just making more money. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Graham stood, pulling Vanessa up with him. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting with the best family law attorney in New York, a friend of Caroline's who owes me a favor. We're going to destroy Marcus Chen's petition so thoroughly he'll wish he'd never heard your name. Then we're going to go to my board meeting together, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I told you, that this is my life, my choice, and if they can't accept that, they can find a new CEO. You'd really give it all up? Vanessa asked. The company, the reputation, everything you've built? Graham pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I gave up everything that mattered the day I decided success was more important than connection. I'm not making that mistake again. You and Lily, you're what matters. Everything else is just numbers on a screen. From the pillow fort, Lily's voice called out, Mr. Graham? Are you going to stay for dinner? I'm hungry and Mr. Cottontail wants mac and cheese. Graham laughed, the sound full and genuine. What do you say? He asked Vanessa. Should I stay for mac and cheese? Vanessa looked at this impossible man who'd somehow become essential, the billionaire who'd learned to build pillow forts, who'd chosen her messy, complicated life over his perfectly controlled empire, who was looking at her like she was worth more than every dollar in his bank account. Stay, she whispered. Please stay. So a final climax 2 weeks later. The courtroom was smaller than Vanessa had expected, less dramatic, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. Marcus Chen sat across the aisle with his court-appointed attorney, looking exactly like what he was, a desperate man making a desperate play. He'd cleaned up for the hearing wearing an ill-fitting suit, but there were shadows under his eyes and a nervousness in his movements that suggested his creditors were closing in. Beside Vanessa sat Patricia Morrison, Caroline's attorney friend and apparently one of the best family lawyers in the state. And on her other side sat Graham wearing his armor, a Tom Ford suit and the expression that had made boardrooms tremble, but his hand was wrapped around Vanessa's, thumb tracing steady circles on her palm. All rise for the Honorable Judge Sandra Martinez. The hearing began. Marcus's attorney made their case. Parental rights, desire to be involved in his daughter's life, claims that Vanessa had been unfairly restrictive. It all sounded almost reasonable until Patricia stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Chen," she said calmly, "when was the last time you provided any financial support for your daughter?" I wasn't in a position to, so never. In the 5 years since Lily's birth, you've contributed $0 to her care. Patricia's voice was pleasant, conversational even, but there was steel underneath. "And when was the last time you had any contact with Ms. Chen or attempted to see your daughter?" She made it difficult. "Actually, Mr. Chen, we have phone records, emails, and testimony showing that Ms. Chen attempted to contact you 17 times in the first year of Lily's life, offering you opportunities to be involved. You responded exactly 0 times, isn't that correct?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I was dealing with personal issues." "Personal issues?" Patricia pulled out a folder. "Would those personal issues include the $53,000 you currently owe to various casinos? The warrant for your arrest in Atlantic City for writing bad checks? The eviction notices from 3 different apartments in the past 18 months? "Objection," Marcus's attorney said weakly. "Relevance? Goes to the petitioner's true motivation, Your Honor," Patricia countered. "We contend this petition has nothing to do with parental rights and everything to do with extortion." Judge Martinez leaned forward. "I'll allow it. Continue, Ms. Morrison." Patricia produced another document. "This is a recorded conversation between Mr. Chen and a Michael Torres, dated 3 days before this petition was filed. Mr. Chen, would you like to tell the court what you said in this conversation?" Marcus's face had gone pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Patricia played the recording. Marcus's voice slightly drunk and very clear. "That article said she's working with Graham Hale now. You know who that is? Billionaire. She's probably sleeping with him, man. I bet I could get at least 100,000 to go away. Maybe more. All I gotta do is threaten custody. She'll pay to make me disappear. She won't risk losing the kid." The courtroom went silent except for the recording's quiet click as it ended. Judge Martinez's expression had gone from neutral to glacial. "Mr. Chen, do you have anything to say?" That's not. I was drunk. I didn't mean. I've heard enough." Judge Martinez shuffled her papers with sharp, precise movements. "This petition is denied. Mr. Chen, you have demonstrated neither the intention nor the capability of being a parent to this child. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible extortion charges." Her eyes found Vanessa. "Ms. Chen, you have full custody of your daughter. Mr. Chen will have no visitation rights and is barred from contacting you or Lily. If he attempts to do so, it will be considered harassment and he will be arrested." She brought her gavel down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo forever. It was over. Emotional resolution. 3 months later. The Riverside Community Center's grand opening was everything Vanessa had imagined and more. Every event space was filled with local entrepreneurs showcasing their businesses. The Margaret Chen Culinary Studio hosted a cooking demonstration that had people lined up out the door. The photography studios were booked solid for the next 6 months. And in the center of it all, surrounded by press and community members, Graham Hale gave a speech that would be quoted in business journals for years to come. "For most of my career," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "I measured success by one metric: profit. How much money could I make? How many companies could I acquire? How big could I build my empire?" He paused, his eyes finding Vanessa in the crowd. "And by those metrics, I was extraordinarily successful. I was also extraordinarily alone." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. This center represents a different kind of success, not measured in quarterly returns but in opportunities created, in small businesses given a chance to grow, in communities strengthened instead of displaced. Graham's voice grew stronger. 3 months ago, my board questioned my judgment for pursuing this project. They said I was making emotional decisions instead of logical ones. And they were absolutely right. A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. "Because sometimes," Graham continued, "the most logical decision is to follow your heart, to invest in people instead of just portfolios, to measure success by impact instead of just income. He smiled, and it was real and unguarded. This center exists because a woman I now love showed me that there's more to life than balance sheets. Because a 5-year-old girl taught me that the best investments can't be quantified. Because I finally learned that being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the only way to truly live. The applause was thunderous, but Vanessa barely heard it. She was too focused on Graham making his way through the crowd toward her, his expression determined. When he reached her, he took both her hands in his. Behind him, she could see Caroline filming on her phone, tears streaming down her face. "Vanessa Chen," Graham said, his voice clear despite the noise around them. "6 months ago, you crashed my failed dinner and changed my life. You showed me what really matters. You taught me how to be human again." He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that made Vanessa's heart stop. "I know this is fast. I know we've barely known each other half a year. I know I'm probably supposed to wait longer, do this more privately, follow some kind of traditional timeline." He opened the box, revealing a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "But I spent 42 years following other people's timelines, living by other people's rules. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to build a life with you and Lily. I want chaotic mornings and pillow forts and mac and cheese dinners. I want everything." Vanessa was crying, laughing, her hands shaking in his. "What about your board? The company?" "I resigned yesterday," Graham said simply. "Effective immediately. Patricia Chen is taking over as CEO. She'll be excellent. I kept enough shares to maintain influence, but the day-to-day? I'm done. I'm going to run this center, help build more like it, invest in people instead of just businesses, actually live instead of just work." "You gave up everything," Vanessa whispered. "No," Graham corrected, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I finally figured out what everything really means. So, Vanessa Chen, will you marry me?" "Yes." The word burst out before she could think, before she could second guess, before she could do anything but follow her heart. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Graham slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the crowd erupted in applause. When they broke apart, Lily was suddenly there, having pushed through the crowd with Margaret, walking with a cane now, but walking, close behind. "Does this mean Mr. Graham is going to live with us?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "And be my daddy?" Graham knelt down to her level, his eyes suspiciously bright. "If that's okay with you, Lily, I'd be honored." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "Mr. Cottontail says yes, and so do I." As Graham stood, Lily in his arms and Vanessa by his side, Margaret put her hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply, "for saving my daughter, for saving all of us, really." "You have it backwards," Graham replied, looking at Vanessa and Lily with undisguised love. "They saved me." Epilogue, 1 year later. The small wedding was held in the Riverside Center's rooftop garden, surrounded by friends, family, and the community they'd built together. Graham wore a simple suit, Vanessa wore her mother's vintage lace dress, and Lily served as flower girl, scattering petals with the serious concentration of someone performing a sacred duty. As they exchanged vows, promises about partnership, support, and building a life that mattered, Graham thought about the man he'd been a year ago, alone at a table in an expensive restaurant, waiting for someone who would never arrive, building an empire but losing himself in the process. And then Vanessa had walked in, soaking wet and desperate and utterly real, and showed him that the best things in life are the ones you can't plan for. The unexpected meetings, the messy complications, the connections that defy logic but make everything finally make sense. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said. "You may kiss the bride." Graham kissed his wife, as their friends and family cheered, as Lily jumped up and down with excitement, as Margaret wiped happy tears from her eyes, as the life he'd built from the ashes of his old one celebrated around them. That night, tucked into their new home, a brownstone in Brooklyn that was nothing like his old sterile penthouse, Graham watched Vanessa read bedtime stories to Lily. He thought about board meetings he no longer attended, quarterly reports he no longer obsessed over, an empire he'd walked away from without regret. "What are you thinking about?" Vanessa asked later, curled against him in their bed. "That I spent 42 years building the wrong thing," Graham said, "and that I'm grateful I finally found the right one, which is this." He pulled her closer. "You, Lily, Margaret, the center, a life that matters instead of just a resume that impresses. I never knew what enough felt like until now." "It was always enough," Vanessa whispered. "You just needed someone to help you see it." Graham kissed her forehead, feeling more wealthy than he ever had with billions in the bank. Because she was right. The numbers had never been enough. The achievements had never filled the emptiness. But this messy, complicated, beautiful life they'd built together, this was everything. And it had all started with a failed dinner date and a desperate woman who taught him that the best investments aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in moments, in laughter, in connection, in the courage to build something real, instead of just something successful. Graham had finally learned the difference, and it had saved his life.